So switching gears a little bit, kind of, you mentioned Greg Garcia earlier,
Mhm.
and I can't think of, financial services, healthcare regulations are absolutely critical, right,
Mhm.
for governance and, particularly in the U.S., right, where we don't even have state by state privacy. You have
Right.
to really count on these sector regulations, but we're seeing a lot of uncertainty
Mhm.
happening right now. I believe
Yeah.
Greg's calling for the HIPAA Security Rule update. Um, in these times of uncertainty, how is that affecting cyber preparedness for
Mhm.
healthcare organizations?
Well, quite honestly, it's creating paralysis, right?
Mm-hmm.
People aren't making critical decisions to move forward because of the uncertainty. They don't know whether they're going to have the funds.
Right.
The feedback I'm getting from most of my clients and the folks I meet with on a regular basis at conferences is they're anticipating a 30% reduction in budgets,
Wow.
30% reduction in funding. That is a massive impact when you're only dealing with very thin margins. Healthcare operates on a 3, 4, 5% margin. And today we're only investing a very small portion of our IT budget towards cyber.
Mm-hmm.
It's slowly, creeping up, right? I
Right.
think the latest stats is we're running maybe around 7% of IT budget on a path to maybe do 9. But if funding cuts by 30%, we're not going to make it to 9. We're going to stagnate, and this problem is going to get amplified. Um, Uncertainty is the right word. I was in D.C. 45 days ago. Met with HHS to try to understand the deputy director there, trying to understand where some of these bills are going.
Mm-hmm.
Many of us are under the belief that the new HIPAA proposed security rule update is dead, right? There's no viable way to implement it. Every major organization, including Greg Garcia and so many others, have all come out vocally against it because it doesn't for two reasons. It doesn't do enough. It doesn't move the guidance to a hard regulatory or regulated environment, and there's no funding to achieve it.
Right.
And then the time to implement, right, is too short. You've got to give a longer runway or a longer entry ramp, into this fast highway of cybersecurity. And so, you can't take an industry that is roughly 15, 20 years behind and expect them to close that gap in 60 days or 90
Right.
days or even 12 months. They need a much longer roadmap. The cyber performance goals was an attempt to do that. CPGs, they were aligned with the 405D framework, or HICcup is known. Um, and they're all based on NIST, right? And so my guidance to the audience is if I was going to pick one framework to try to build my cyber program, I'd pick NIST, right? That's what OCR is looking for. That's what CISO is looking for. HHS ultimately is adopting it. Federal government, in terms of critical infrastructure, are all adopting NIST. So let's just go where everyone else is going and be accountable for it. And don't wait, right? Don't wait to whatever happens on the Hill in Washington. Um, it's your business, your operations, and it's your community. We're all patients, so we all deserve access to health care. And so let's do our part to make sure that we're implementing a program that maintains continuity of care and provides patient safety.
So given all of that, right, like
Yeah.
that's a lot and that's
Yeah.
scary, but we
Yeah.
also hear, right, FDA calling for secure by design and,
Hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
basically things that are going to take a lot of
Yeah.
funding and a lot of work. How do we reconcile that and what's that mean?
Yeah, I mean and I'm a big supporter of secure by design
Yeah.
because it's holding the manufacturers accountable. I talk with CIOs daily about the legacy equipment that they have within their environment, and the CFOs that say, is it functional? Does it deliver care? Right? What's the alternative? Well, the manufacturer doesn't have a fix for it. You got to upgrade, right? Well, that upgrades millions of dollars, right? And it's difficult for a struggling business to say, stop using that MRI machine. And we're going to buy another one. And it's going to cost us $3 million to do it, let alone the rip out, replace, and implementation of it, and the downtime associated with it, and the impact to the patients and the patient continuity of care. It's a really difficult decision for CFOs and CIOs to make, and so the accountability has to be put back. And this is what this bill is working on, is put the accountability back on the manufacturers, right? Build it with security in mind. Don't build it the cheapest, fastest way and let the security problem be someone else's problem, because but we're gonna have a long tail on this legacy device item, right? And we're gonna have to think about network segmentation and other control mechanisms to control that blast radius. But I think it's a good movement. The problem is I think it's stalled right now. I mean, I don't think we're getting good movement because we're focusing on so many other things. That word uncertainty fits in here again as well, right? But software SBOM and the whole section 5248 is the right direction, right, in terms of it and holding accountability. I just don't know that there's enough teeth in the bill to actually get it accomplished and get it over over truly on the desk and get the gavel to swing.
And that's been an ongoing problem for some time. I mean, as I recall, I think the medical devices have been in this weird gray area. And how do you hold them accountable? I mean, who has the teeth to do that, Russell? Because it's so critical. I mean, particularly as we talked about earlier, the significant reliance on suppliers and third-party vendors that healthcare organizations have. Something like this is significant.
Yeah, no, it really is. I think the mechanism, unfortunately, has to be done grassroots. We can try to get the regulatory movement to support it, and I think we're having the right conversations. I just don't think we're moving fast enough on it. Right. With everything that's going on in DC, but own accountability at your individual level, right? Make choices, integrate into your procurement process to ask, right? Will you support this, right? Will you upgrade it if new vulnerabilities are discovered, right? Engage with those strategic partners that provide you the equipment, that stand behind their equipment, and move off the ones that don't, right? I know that is a long strategy, a long game strategy. But what else? I mean, look, we're left with very few choices, right? We're going to continue to pray that the regulatory and legislative landscape will support us. But what can I do today? I can take action in my own organization. I can make better decisions, right? I tell my customers all the time, right? You've got long-term vendor relationships. I know those are the ones that are most likely going to take advantage of you the most. Just like car insurance, renegotiate every year, right? Shop it every year. You'll get better prices. If you shop your vendors every year, shorten up the term of the contract, give you exit roads or exit ramps to be able to change vendors and be willing to do so. And I know that's hard, and I can hear CIOs in the back of my head going, Russ, that's just not reasonable. I don't have the resources. I don't have the skills and expertise. I don't have the downtime. Those are all real problems, but those are the direct answers, right? I mean, and then when you can't make changes, then you just you wrap it with security, right? Try to control the blast radius and have alternative options.
I think that connects to you very much back to your initial comments on third-party risk too, right? Like, but it's not just the vendors, right? The third-party risk is much broader than that. Can you talk about like what that risk as a whole is and how to manage kind of the third-party risk altogether?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about third-party risk, right? Healthcare organizations run on third parties. They do everything. Think about all the medical devices; they're considered third parties. All the enabling technologies, they're all third parties. All the software packages, they're all third parties. They can't do and provide services to local communities without third parties. So, third parties is a critical component to their overall ecosystem in terms of operations and operation resiliency. So, understanding which third parties deliver the most critical elements of your of your operation. If you can't register patients and get them brought into the ED or brought into the hospital for services, everything behind it just doesn't matter, right? And so what are those critical business processes that are delivered by third parties? Make sure you understand them, make sure you map them, and make sure you're doing data flow analysis. If we had done that, we would have identified single points of failure like Change, where we were only processing payments, through a single provider. And if that provider, if you do the scenario and X that provider out and says Change is no longer here, CFOs would go, wait a minute, right? We only have a time to survive about 15, 30 days, right? We can't run this hospital without cash. And so cash flow is king. And so understanding those data flows, understanding those critical business processes, building in monitoring elements to ensure continuity and capability is I think is the biggest way. Use things like, do you have a SOC 2? Are you doing high trust compliance? Give me access to your external vulnerabilities and penetration testings. Look at the SBOMs, right? I guess really what I'm talking about is a third-party risk management program, right? It is one of the top 3 things I hear at boards, right, on a regular basis, where chairmen are asking, hey, what are we doing in our third-party ecosystem? Change really hurt us, Move it hurt us, and so on. So it is a board-level topic, and third-party risk is one of those critical elements that I think we really need to focus on and continue to evolve. It's more than check the box, right? And I hear so many people say, well, it's just, vendors don't respond, vendors don't do this. There are a lot of really great enabling tools with the age of AI that will go out and compile a bunch of publicly available data, as well as kind of hidden data on the dark web and other stuff. Which vendors are being targeted, which vendors are at risk, which vendors have suffered a data breach in the background. If you bring all of that data into view for you when you're evaluating, you might make a different choice, right, in terms of which vendors you select.
Do you see things like Move It, or is the healthcare industry kind of reliant on incidents like that to help them better identify blind spots? Is that kind of how they're relying on figuring out cracks in the system, given they don't have a lot of money to be proactive, right?
Yeah.
To do all this searching. I mean, is this largely driving these discussions at the higher level?
It is, because it does give us, it pinpoints where weak points are, right? We didn't know about Change Healthcare until Change Healthcare occurred, right? And we didn't really think about it in that way. Change Healthcare also exposed the risk not only to third parties, but also fourth and fifth parties, because organizations that didn't even use Change as a processor found that their partners that they rely on did use Change and they were down. So it was a rippling effect, right? That went all the way down to third, fourth, and fifth party. So understanding data flows and data maps, and if I'm extending my data out to a service to do something with, and then they outsource it to another service to do a much smaller component of it, and then maybe they outsource it to something else, right? Contractually, the contract should all be obviously linked, right, through limits of liability, to ensure that not only the vendor that I engage with, but all of its subsidiaries, third parties, so drive legally down, so give you some legal protections and limits of liability. But then also ask those questions during your third-party risk management reviews to try to understand them, because if you have one vendor that does everything in-house and they maintain it, they don't use any third party, that risk is much lower than a vendor that may be sharing that data and distributing it, right? And because when you get beyond third party, get to fourth and fifth, there's a lot less control and a lot less visibility at that level.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole dependency tracking thing that in technology we deal with everywhere, right?
Right.
And I mean that's just a very real version of it.
Yeah. Contract. Getting contract limits of liability, getting contract security obligations embedded in there, notifications, right? When something does go wrong, right? An example, we incorporated a year or so ago we incorporated breach notifications in our third-party risk management program, so that if the list of vendors that are critical to your operations, and we hear or see about a breach or a potential breach on the dark web where we're seeing threat actors begin to target or focus on them, we'll notify, right? And says, hey, we've got to shore up something going on with this vendor, right? Let's look for alternative paths. Let's look for, reducing or segmenting or limiting. Let's do an access control review to make sure that what access they have is limited. I think all of those are major factors tied to managing that risk, and treating them with high impact. Understand that they are critical to your continuity of care.
Yeah, so you've talked about the risk side of it, but how do we balance, right? Like when we talked about data minimization, you were talking about all the value we get out of it. There's so much value in further innovation, but yet all this risk. What's the right balance?
Yeah, balance is going to be, if you think about the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? In certain sectors or industries, right, the C or the I, the integrity, data integrity, means more than the availability, right? But in healthcare, availability is everything, right? And so that triad spins with availability up top, and it's paramount, right? Because when care services aren't available, loss of life will and can occur, right? Not having the right mammogram systems, not having the right imaging systems to be able to help, a mother in pregnancy, right? Forcing them to drive an hour down the road to get the care. Maybe they make it, maybe they don't, right? Same thing with critical care, needs of EDs down because, they're underneath a ransomware attack and everything's encrypted, loss of life. It's a real thing, and it's proven, and now has hit litigation. Do what you can. Understand your data architecture, understand your data inventory, understand which systems interact, store, process, and or transmit that data, and then build security in layers. Build it defense in depth to be able to provide operational resiliency in your program. It requires funding. It requires conversations with the board, right, and understand the criticality of it. But yeah, start now and continue, right? Build those relationships at the executive level. That opens up funding for you. We do what we can in the subsidy side of the house, looking for grants, looking for subsidized fundings, like USAC, Universal Service Account Consortium. There's several of those. Join buying groups to be able to reduce, and get discounts. There's all of those things you have to apply. There's not a silver bullet in this situation. Yeah.
What role does AI have to play in all of this? I mean, is there a world where healthcare could tap into AI to help them, gain that 20-year gap, or in some response leapfrog ahead? I mean, I'm just thinking in an ideal world here. I mean, it's how are we looking at AI here to help move things forward?
Rachel, it's a great question, and actually a very forward-thinking question in terms of, when I talked about AI, I talked about three worlds. One of those is the defensive side. Right. I think that's where we're going to get speed to value, right? I met with Gardner last week and talking with the analyst around where AI is going and what the implications of AI will be to healthcare and to cyber defenders like Fortified. And it's using AI on the front end to be predictive, right? To help identify changes in system behavior, user behavioral, network traffic behavioral changes that gives us the early indicators that something is happening. Right. The quicker that we can identify, provide that visibility, the faster we can engage in an instant response plan, right? We a lot of us have motion lights on the house. We have cameras that trigger off alarms and alerts. That's visibility, right? Someone's in the driveway, right? Okay, well, I need to go check. Who is it, right? If I don't have that visibility, I'm just locked in a dark room. you can't be proactive. You're 100% reactive, and that's not moving forward. So getting healthcare to move into a proactive state, even if it's the most basic visibility, but have some visibility so that your team can take action. And in most cases, I think the current trend is really engaging, outsourcing and engaging a managed security service provider as an example to try to bring those services, because one of the critical challenges in healthcare is attracting and retaining top talent in cyber, right? So many of the other industries, quite honestly, pay more. People that are in healthcare are there because they're passionate about healthcare. They're passionate about serving people, caring for people. Doesn't always mean that they're the best cyber talent in the world, because some of the working environments inside of a health system, you don't have in other industries, right? Banks aren't open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Right. Hospitals are, right? And so, which means your ability to reboot systems, take them offline, do maintenance, is much harder in a healthcare environment. So, young talent, we have to do more to incentivize young talent to go into the healthcare cybersecurity realm, and stay there. And we've got to find a way to get not only the training and education we need, but also just the pay scales in a more appropriate way.
There seems to be a lot of folks we have here on the podcast do come from a military background, such as yourself. And, is there kind of, I call it like a feeder program as folks kind of look to what's next after military service? Is that an opportunity then to start trying to push forward for folks? Hey, you could put your lens here, because I know a lot of folks coming out of military backgrounds, sometimes there's uncertainty because you come from a very regimented, scheduled world, and now you're kind of plotting your own course. And I love to hear when folks find their way to cyber, but it sounds like healthcare in particular is such an important critical industry for daily lives. How could we get more driving folks interested in that path?
Yeah, the White House took this up as well as security training and cybersecurity skills. They've taken it up in K-12 as well, right? And so CISA actually has a series of interns, apprenticeships, things like that to help you transition. Obviously, there's some priorities for people coming out of the military and making that transition. I came out of the military, did 10 years, did a number of government service, supporting, 3-letter agencies across DC, and then ultimately landed in industry, right? And so I highly recommend that kind of transitional plan and path. Cybersecurity is a great place to go in general, and healthcare is a sector in need. So there are lots of opportunity. I forget the recent number. I guess I could look it up quickly, but the recent number in terms of the cybersecurity skills gap, right? Yes. In terms of the need. Lots of opportunity here, and it doesn't take a significant amount of training and education to begin moving in that direction, right? And there are great programs. CISA's website has a ton of interns and apprenticeships that you can get started with while you still go to school and get paid, right? And so it's best of both worlds while you learn and begin to start either your career or a new career.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for interest and aptitude in cybersecurity, and I think people kind of don't realize that.
What's interesting in healthcare, a lot of the IT directors, were prior nurses, right? So, they went in with a passion to take care of people. They did bedside, for, 10, 15 years. They move into data and informatics to try to improve overall operation of care. And then next thing you know, they find themselves wearing an IT security hat or an IT director hat, right? And so, so many different ways to get into cyber, right? It doesn't always have to be the more traditional path, coming up through a help desk. There's so many other ways to do it, and healthcare affords that opportunity to laterally move within the sector, within the care. Some of my both best friends and what I consider very forward thinking were prior nurses or clinicians, doctors that have moved over and says, we see and recognize the problem, and I'm gonna use my capabilities to try to bring that security forward.
It's wonderful. Yeah. When you see the cracks in the system and then you're able to do something about it, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
Yeah. And self-governance, right? I mean, if I roll the clock back 20 years and I think about, the days before PCI and the days before, so many of the other industries, retail, was struggling, gas stations were the credit card servers were sitting in the gas stations, right, and storing every credit card transaction in an unencrypted way, and people were smashing and grabbing those servers. It's the same thing. Back then we used the term as we'd much rather self-govern by the industry than have federal government demand or tell us what it is. And so healthcare's got to do the same thing. We have to self-govern, right? And so we need to take responsibility for running a business, right, and protecting that operational business, right? And so when we do that, the uncertainty in DC goes away, right? It really becomes, look, it's a priority because I want resiliency in my operations. Hospitals are businesses, whether we like it or not. They're businesses. Most of them are for profit. There are many nonprofit ones that are tied to critical access and rural facilities. But it's still a business, and you need to think about protecting that business, providing operational resiliency, business continuity, and security is a critical element associated with that.
Absolutely. Well, I know we're kind of on time. Thank you for your generosity of time. I know we went a little long today, Russell, but thank you so much. And I do want to encourage all of our listeners. I was kind of stalking you on LinkedIn. But I highly recommend folks follow Russell on LinkedIn. He's initiating and encouraging really important and insightful conversations on these themes, and it's very beneficial to follow it and find out what's going on, and also to be part of the conversation, particularly if you are in healthcare or in the cybersecurity world. Yeah. So to all of our listeners, again, thank you for joining us this week, as always. And I'm going to drum roll, please, to John Knepher of what we like to ask them to do.
Oh, it's definitely smash that subscribe button.
That's right. I need to get like a big green Hulk fist that we can smash. So again, Russell, thank you so much for your time today. And to all of our listeners, we look forward to being with you next week. So be sure to subscribe and get that fresh episode on Tuesday. And you get to hear from Russell in the next episode. How awesome is that? So, till next time, everybody, stay secure.